Welcome to the No Cams Podcast. I'm Sunny G.
I'm Akash.
I'm Jason, and here on the No Camps Podcast, we talk about movies, television, a variety of other fun topics. But today, we're getting into Westworld Season 2, Episode 9, titled Vanishing Point. So, just want to get your gut reactions. What did you guys think of Vanishing Point?
I really enjoyed it. Man, this show tends to be better in the second half of the season, or finish stronger as the season wraps up. I think I felt the same way about season 1. Again, I'd have to rewatch to kind of gauge my thoughts again, but the show really is ending strongly. I've been waiting for this episode for a while, kind of a character study of the Man in Black, or as he doesn't like to be called, Billy. There were a lot of good moments here. We can dive into it. There are a little bit of nuggets here that they gave us. Jason, you and I mentioned this a little bit before. The Ford and Maeve scene was a nice little nugget, which is a lot. Offers a lot of intrigue, right? And I want to see a whole episode just dedicated to that. That'd be dope. And just a lot of questions too now about Willaim. The episode ends with a big cliffhanger. So I'm excited for the series or the season finale next week, and it looks like there's a lot for them to work on for season 3. So there's no way any of this is going to be resolved in one episode. So, what do you guys think?
I mean, I liked and disliked it. It's interesting you say that they've left themselves a lot to work with. I feel like that's pretty easy when you don't actually do anything with what you've got, right? When you hardly do any work. And that's hyperbolic, but really what I mean is, like, we got a good glimpse of the Man in Black, but even then there's still so much, I think, left unanswered about his real motivations. Part of it could just be that I really need to binge the first season and second season together and get much more of a continuity in terms of character motivations and stuff. But for me, it felt like they gave some answers that didn't quite add up with what I had in mind about, like, what's driving the Man in Black, what his backstory was. And they gave us a scene with Ford and Maeve that to me sounded and felt like it made sense, but in the grander context also kind of felt out of place. And then as we watched Dolores and Teddy's storyline end, I got to say I was totally surprised by that. I had no idea that was happening, but I'm kind of left feeling like in this next episode we'll see some couple things get tidied up, but ultimately they'll be in more or less the same place as they were at the end of first season, and I'll only have barely a handful of answers and really anything to say about what went on this season of real importance.
That's a really good point. This is a very good show to binge because it pulls in a lot from previous episodes. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, like, waiting a week, I kind of lose some of the focus because I'm not thinking about this episode throughout the whole week as I would be with, like, Game of Thrones. So this is a great show just to sit and watch, like, spend an entire weekend and just kind of go through both seasons. I think it's a better experience in that way.
Yeah, and I think unlike other shows, continuity, because of its non-linearity, is something that it probably leans way heavily on, and is something that I'm not bringing to every episode, which is probably why I'm not getting as much out of it or, like, appreciating it as much as I could be.
Speaking of continuity, I know, Jason, I still want to hear your thoughts, but at some point in this discussion, I'd like for us to try to piece together the timeline from what we've seen so far, just so I understand that I'm on the same page with the story. And it'd be interesting to see what you guys think as well. But
totally.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
With this episode, it was kind of funny. I wasn't really that excited to watch it the first time, and I wasn't really excited to watch on the rewatch. But on both times, I kind of get halfway through the episode, and I'm like, "Damn, this is kind of interesting." And I get kind of into it. So it's kind of funny how that's the episode for me. And I ultimately agree with both of you guys in a sense. Like I really like this episode. At the same time, I'm with Sunny. There's points that I really didn't. But overall, I feel like this season, because I was thinking about binging it at the end of this episode for some reason. I was like, when this comes out, if I binge the season, is that going to change my perspective? And I don't think ultimately it's going to be as good, because I feel like this season was kind of muddled, and the motivations of the characters seemed kind of all over the place, and the characters themselves were kind of all over the place. And it just didn't feel like, this felt like a weird experiment of a season, and not necessarily like, I mean, I think they're doing a great job patching it up, and I've really liked these last handful of episodes. But I mean, just as a season, the first season felt like it had a more cohesive vision. As this season just feels like it's trying to introduce different things. It knows that there's a potential third season. I think they're adding all these elements, and they're adding certain levels of complexity that don't necessarily serve the story. You know, in the first season, we had one question: are they going to become conscious? You know, and what's that going to look like? This season, I feel like we have so many. We have so many questions about all these characters. And
can you elaborate what some of those questions are?
Okay, so the things with the Man in Black. What's going on with the Man in Black? Ford, what's his involvement in the park now in death? Maeve, what's going on with Maeve and her storyline? Is she going to find her daughter? Now she's found her daughter. Is she going to reunite with her daughter? What's going to happen with Maeve? Teddy, what's Teddy's journey? You know, it's just like all these other characters and stories. I mean, and it's kind of enriched the universe in a way, but you know, I don't know if I'm looking for another show that's just like this big universe builder. You know, I kind of liked like the murder mystery of the first season, and I was kind of hoping for kind of that linear story, linear questions that we were asking in the second season. And again, I mean, I do like it. I like this episode overall, but I just feel, I don't know, I just feel kind of weird at this point with this season. It feels kind of muddled with me, you know. And I don't know if that's kind of what you're hinting at too, Sonny. But
definitely, yeah, muddled might be just like the perfect word to describe it. Is I felt like to a certain degree, to as much of a degree as the writers wanted us to, I understood what happened first season, and how characters got to where they are. Again, like excluding the ones that they obviously obscured, like how did Arnold become Bernard, right? And what was that evolution path? You know, is Maeve supposed to leave the park on a script? Is she even like alive or awoke in that sense? You know, some of those things were left unanswered, and we got some answers to some of those. But I feel like, they did a lot of universe building, and the universe feels thicker and richer and denser. But that's not why I wanted this season to exist. I wanted this season to exist to see like what does it look like when they leave? You know, what is it? Do they even know what it means to leave? Like, who wants to leave, right? We got teased some of these different directions of story in as like minor subplots of certain episodes, but yeah.
Well, like, so, you know, leaving fodder for season 3, if they get even deeper into the lore behind hosts and all that stuff, like I'll probably be out season 3, you know, like I've liked the direction, and I like they've picked up the pieces and kind of tied things in pretty well, I think, in the season, especially as we've like fully acknowledged the first 3 episodes were just kind of shitty, and then they picked up and they did really well. But yeah, I mean, I'm not that curious. Like that, again, it's not like you said, something. That's not why I'm interested in Westworld. It's not what got me hooked in the first season, and those aren't really the questions that are keeping me hooked in this season, you know.
And I will say, like, to give them credit, it's definitely easy given the subject matter of the show, for it to go down an incredibly familiar route. So I got to give them credit for definitely not going that route.
Yeah.
It seems like they are casting a very wide net on the set of like philosophical topics and popular sci-fi topics that can be covered, and they are looking at them, in my opinion, at too high level of a view, and they're not like sticking with one of them or trying to dive deep into any one of them. And so in this casting a wide net, it feels like they don't have like an overarching unified theme or philosophy behind the show so much as like, let's just play with time and start asking some big open questions and see what falls out. And granted, they've done a decent job of it, but yeah, but if that's what I knew I was going to get, I think I would have been expecting a little bit more.
Yeah, and then also on this episode specifically, I said it before this podcast with Akash. I kind of feel like this could have been 3 episodes, or like in an alternate universe, this would have been 3 episodes. Or there's 3 elements of this which would have made complete episodes, and this one was really focused on the Man in Black and his character and his history, that character, and that was one, and that's an episode in its own. But then I also felt like Bernard kind of losing connection with Ford. That could have been explored, all of that, in another one of its own episodes. Mm-hmm. And then the connection with Ford and Maeve at the end of this episode, I feel like that could have all been exposed through its own episode too, where that was the main focus. Because that was such an awesome moment. But then on the rewatch, I started thinking, and I was like, man, it's an emotional moment. But why am I so emotional? I've never seen these two on camera. I've never seen them together, and I've just learned that this is Maeve's Ford's favorite. Like, I just figured this out just now. And it's because Anthony Hopkins is such a great actor. He just sells it, man. He sells it. And it's fantastic, and it's touching. But it's like, well, I'm not that touched by it, really. Or I shouldn't be. I'm being fooled by good acting, not by storytelling. And they should have given us a whole episode. I would have loved to see more of those, and we may get that moving on. But I mentioned to you guys that this episode felt rushed, and that's what I mean. I just feel like it's like the writers knew, oh shit, we fucked up the first 3 episodes. We have all this stuff we need to get in. So we got 2 more episodes. Let's cram it in. Mm-hmm. Let's get these plot points in so that we have this awesome finale. And so I don't know. I liked it and disliked it. All right. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah. No. I don't know if I agree with you guys. I'm still kind of ruminating on some of your points, but maybe we can recap it at that season, like a season finale episode. Because I would really who knows what happens after episode 10? That could completely change a lot of our views and opinions.
Yeah, and that's another thing I noticed watching the show too, is like there's so much been happening, and our opinions have changed so quick. And I remember, like, episode to episode, it feels like this whole show feels different episode to episode. And then when we were recapping the early ones, and we weren't really liking it.
Yeah.
And we're just throwing out ideas like, fuck it, this would be a good idea. This would be a good idea. And then out of that, Akash goes, maybe it's Ford's consciousness. And shit, it turned out to be true. And then you were saying, like, maybe the hosts they're using the hosts and turning hosts into, or guests into hosts. And we're like, well, I don't know. That kind of seems like a plausible after this episode.
Yeah.
It's so hard to put my finger on this season. Like, is that a good thing that those like crazy ideas came true? Is it like, I don't know.
I think holistically it's a good thing.
That's the fun part of this show, right? We're allowed to just sit here and get together and talk about some of our crazy theories and see if we're on the same page as the writers are, and it's somewhat satisfying. I think that is an element of the show that what makes it fun to watch week to week. And maybe that will be left behind and forgotten when people revisit the show in 10 years. Like, even on a binge, you're not given the time to sit and like theorize and postulate what will happen next week. You just are given the answers immediately when you're binging it. So it's an interesting experience for younger folks who didn't get a chance to experience this, the live experience, week to week experience. Because after this 10-week time frame, you really don't get to have the same experience as we did watching it.
I almost feel like the show is itself a product of that kind of watching style, that kind of environment. Right. Like the fact that we were speculating so much, like speculation is fun in a show where you don't really know like what the rules of the universe are. But I feel like the show's almost leaning so heavily on it and on the fact that like it's still your traditional week by week structure, that it's written more in a way to milk attention over 10 weeks than it is to provide a lasting or somewhat timeless storyline.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That might be too much, but I that's the kind of general feeling I get sometimes about the show.
Interesting. All right.
Well, let's get into it. Vanishing Point. So we open with images of the overflown bathtub that we've seen before, and the man in black, and we hear him speaking to his wife. We see Willaim and his wife at this fancy gala or event. He speaks briefly with his wife before we see Dolores walk by, serving drinks on a serving tray. Then we hear him speak about whether or not his life experiences were a dream, and we hear his wife, Jackie, whisper, "Is this real?" We then see the man in black wake up with Emily in the park, and she's taking care of him, and they're waiting for a rescue team that she sent for. They both are kind of blaming themselves for Jackie's suicide, and Emily kind of talks about this music box Jackie gave her when she was young that she threw out. And Emily says it was basically too late to make amends with Jackie, but she's there to try to make amends with Willaim, or the man in black.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our opening scene on what's going to be basically an episode about Willaim, right? We're just diving into the man in black's character. Did you have any what did that?
No, it was just, basic setting, right?
Yeah.
Kind of just tells us this is when his wife was alive, which is pretty interesting. I think she did not die too long ago, so the death is still pretty raw, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say less than like a month.
Yeah, right. Because he goes back to the park after his wife dies, right? So all of this has kind of happened in the last few weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like seeing the man in black in nature, in the real world. It's just kind of interesting to see him at a party or an event, and not donning the hat and the black clothing. And it's just kind of cool because the hints that they've dropped in the show is he's this totally different guy. So it's really great to see Ed Harris play this guy, and as an actor he's so good that,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe just because we know so much about his character, we see him playing the nice guy and being the respectable guy, but we can kind of see the demon underneath,
It was
Mhm.
also nice to see his wife, because I think in flashbacks she was only in one of the scene, and they just took I think what I heard on another podcast called Decoding Westworld is that she was just some sort of extra, a stock photo model or something, and she just I don't think they thought they'd use her that much, but it seemed like they got a well-established actress or somewhat established actress to play the wife. She looks pretty familiar. I think I feel like I've seen her in OC or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think she's the wife from The Fugitive with Harrison Ford.
Oh, okay.
The one killed by the one-armed man.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. She is in The Fugitive.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice. Her name.
She
is
did a good
Stella
job.
Ward.
I
Stella
thought
Ward.
she does a good job throughout and they've done that really well in this season, is bringing these little what do you call them, feature actors for each one of these episodes, and they just kill it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So anyways, as we move on, we see Dolores and Teddy running into the Ghost Nation, who says that the Valley Beyond isn't meant for her. Dolores tells them that the Valley Beyond is a tool that's to, quote, ensure their immortality. And she says that she's going to go and she's going to use it against them. The Ghost Nation says, no, it's not a tool. It's a door to a new world. And they try to resist each other. And the Ghost Nation try to stop Dolores. But Dolores and Teddy just gun them all down.
Mm-hmm.
Teddy then goes to make sure that none of them have escaped. And he spots one of the Ghost Nation men and just lets him go.
The number 2 Ghost Nation man, right?
Yeah, the
Right.
guy that Aki scalped in the last episode.
Yeah, to tattoo the mace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Do you guys know why the Savage Nation? Why they have
Ghost Nation.
Ghost Nation.
Sorry.
Jesus.
You're thinking of that conservative
Yeah.
Savage Nation.
Yeah.
Radio talk show host. I forget his name.
Alex Jones, I think.
No, not Alex Jones.
Anyways, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Why did they have those other hosts, prisoner hosts? Or were there any humans that
Were those the guests? Were those the ones that so these are the people that we saw get tied up with Ashley Stubbs and Emily when they were on the beach. Remember? And they disappeared.
I didn't recognize any of the faces, but yeah, I'm fairly certain that these are real life people captured after the dinner party.
I thought one of them was, because only one of them was wearing like a tux and like a proper suit. The other one seemed to be wearing like a top hat, and like they look like hosts. Because these guys, they don't like differentiate between they know who hosts are and who guests are, but they seem to be saving both, right?
Yeah, they seem to. Yeah. So it's unclear, and it's like, judging from their behavior, it's hard to tell too, just because they could treat hosts that nice, and they could also treat humans that nice.
And I'm almost convinced that the Valley Beyond is where, like, I don't know why, but I think this is where Delos was, his father-in-law was held. I for some reason think that's where they're trying to get to. She was saying, like, this is where your masters don't want. That's where they seek like immortality or whatever. And wasn't that where they were testing it?
Yeah, don't they answer what the Valley Beyond is in this episode?
Do they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do, right?
Well, they introduce a new concept called the Forge.
Yeah,
I think that's the Valley Beyond, right?
Is it?
I thought that was a forge.
All right, well, Jesus.
And people ask me why I don't like the show that much, or I'm getting tired of the show. It seemed unclear. I didn't understand what Dolores and him were talking about. Like, it seemed almost like they were talking past each other. Can you recount the conversation again, Jason? Exactly what was said?
I can't remember exactly what was said. Between the main guy, the number 2 guy, and Dolores.
Yeah,
he just said the Valley Beyond isn't meant for you, and then she says, she says that it's a tool, and then he says no. Yeah, I think I kind of did it almost exactly. She says it's a tool to ensure their immortality.
Yeah.
She says, but I'm going to use it against them, and he says, the Valley Beyond is not a tool; it's a door to a whole new world. And something like that, and it's not meant for you.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like they're talking about two completely different things, unless there is some deeper meaning.
Yeah, unless Dolores' understanding of it is not complete.
Right, that could be it. We remember earlier in the season, she says, "I know where to hurt them because they showed me." Right, and she's talking about Willaim showing her the destination. So it's perfectly possible that, like, what Akishita sees as the door is an entirely different entity than what Willaim shows Dolores, because we haven't actually seen a scene of that, right? Of Willaim showing her anything yet.
That's what I'm assuming is the Forge. I mean, it just seems like they introduced this. This is when they're talking about, like, she's gonna use it against him, and now that they're introducing the idea that the Forge isn't a place; it's a server. Like, as we're learning, there's information, and as Bernard warns later, like, could you imagine what one host will do if they could get all that information? So it just seems like she's kind of in the know. It seems like that's what Willaim showed her. The Forge was kind of his project. So the Forge, and maybe the Forge has been programmed into the host as the Valley Beyond. Like, they see that information as a way to get out.
Beyond, right?
Say it again, Akash.
The Forge exists inside the Valley Beyond. The Valley Beyond is like a sector location, and within that is a Forge or something. I don't know where else.
Or maybe the opposite. Like, the Forge itself is the server, but then there's some part of the server that, I don't know, maybe lets you get out or escape or trigger something. Yeah.
I think it's got to be all the same. Or what I feel like it's all the same, especially with the finale being next week.
Right.
So
I don't know, but there is what I did transcribe was like, as they're gunning down all these Ghost Nation guys, Dolores goes up to one who's dying, and she's about to stab and kill him, and he says, "There's no place for you in the new world."
Right.
And she goes, "I told you, friend, not all of us deserve to make it to the Valley Beyond." And I don't know, it's just, that seemed like a weird statement, like right then and there. Like, I don't
exactly.
know, did they know each other, or like, what was?
Well, the significance, I think, of that is to also call back to episode 1 or 2 when Bernard sees in the mind egg or whatever.
Yeah.
They replayed that same scene back, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, they're finally catching us up, right?
Yeah.
They're closing the gap in between in chronology.
Yeah.
But to Jason's point, I felt the exact same way when I saw it. I was like, he said that you do not belong there, right?
Yeah.
And she says, well, not all of us can make it. And I feel like that's a complete dismissal of what he said.
Like you said, they are talking like past each other in
Yeah.
moment. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an important detail or if there's meaning that I'm not understanding, but that stuck out to me for that reason, because it felt like they weren't really speaking on the same level about the same thing.
And also, for some reason, the number 2 guy looking at Teddy, I think like he telegraphed or like some sort of telepathically opened up his mind or something. Like, is that what you guys got?
Ooh.
Because Teddy completely changed.
Well, he changed like in that moment, but I think Teddy was.
Moment. He hesitated on. I mean, the guy was looking right at him, and he hesitated pulling the trigger, and he let him escape.
No, I think that's supposed to let us know that Teddy's
core
what
hasn't
happens
changed.
later. Well, no, I think that his core has changed. Like, despite him, becoming his aggression being amped to 11, I think that's a signal to us, the audience, that he is not fully under Dolores' thumb.
So you don't
despite
think the interaction with Ghost Nation didn't change anything? Like, it's too random for it to be just like out of like his own like his will or something. Because like we don't see any hint of it before this. Like he's complete. I mean, the last episode we see him basically beat a guy to death with his fist.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then he sees him, he hesitates, and then at the end of the episode we see a complete character change in Teddy. So there's something that interacting with Ghost Nation, maybe.
Or was it
sure,
Maeve?
Man. Maybe
was his interaction with Maeve?
Maybe, who knows?
Because we saw him with Maeve at the end, and Maeve kind of calls Dolores out for changing Teddy, like right in front of Teddy. I don't know. It seemed like they've kind of showed that Teddy's struggled this whole season, and like constantly resorting back to his like core, his cornerstone, his core programming. So yeah, Teddy just seemed like confused this whole time. So like to me, that was just like Teddy saw that, and inside it was, do I gun down this guy, or do I let him go? Do I gun down this guy, which is what they tell me to do, which Dolores told me to do, or do I just let him go? And I feel like that's the moment where Teddy just kind of woke up, and I think at the end he's just like, I can't take this. I think he knows that there's gonna be elements of his programming that's gonna hinder him from like really feeling free, and he's just like, well, screw it, I'm gonna put a bullet in my brain. It's over.
No, I think from a story perspective, Akash, what you're saying makes sense, except for the fact that like none of the Ghost Nation have been shown to have any extra normal powers. Right. But from a narrative perspective, I'm pretty sure that was just included as a way of one, letting us know that Teddy isn't just Dolores's like pet, and two, to help ease the audience into the decision he makes later, which I think without him having let this Indian go would have seemed kind of even more out of character and out of left field.
In my mind, Jason, this is probably like something that they could have taken their time with developing and explaining, because it's just very rash and quickly just shown on the screen in like 35 seconds. And we just have to accept that something changed in Teddy between episodes 7 and 9.
Or it's not even maybe change. It's maybe the thing that was unchanged. Like the thing that kept him from killing the Confederados that prompted Dolores to amp his aggression up, that could very well be the thing that's still in Teddy that hasn't changed. And it's only the outward aggression that's changed, and has made him like probably has made an even starker contrast between who he is on the outside and who he is on the inside. That probably led him to that decision. Like I could imagine. Sorry?
Just made him more confused about himself.
Yeah, it could be that it made him more confused, and it made his choice more rash than otherwise. Like I could very well have imagined that if Dolores had not done anything, Teddy probably at some point could have just bailed. Could have just been like, Dolores, this isn't for me. I don't want this anymore. Even though you're my cornerstone, I might help you, but you're not going to make me like kill hosts and people and shit.
Yeah.
And just exited, as opposed to his much more drastic measure.
Yeah, again, it's going back to his program. And I think like a really good example of that is when we see the gang go back to Sweetwater. And I think this was before they turned up his aggression. Yeah, this was the episode before they turned up his aggression, though. But he goes into the saloon, the Mariposa, and he grabs a bottle, and he's like, oh, and he doing no good sitting in that bottle. You know, he's going back to his old
That was after.
lines. That was after his aggression.
That was the first thing we see of Teddy. The episode after it ends with him getting amped.
Like really executes one of the texts like on this track too.
Right.
So there you go. He's like, there's still like the inner Teddy, inner Teddy is still coming out. You know.
Yeah.
I think all the heightened aggression really did was obviously just make him a much more useful weapon, but also highlight to whatever part of him inside like how fake his life actually is, right? Because it's one thing to be shown all that shit, and it's another thing to be forced to act out of your own nature, to be like, holy shit, I am really just a pawn in somebody else's game.
Especially with Dolores continuously telling you, we're free.
Precisely.
We're not. You know, I'm not.
Yeah.
All right, well, then moving on, we're at the Delos lab again, and they're running a test with Clementine, basically to see if they can use Maeve's code to use Clementine to send messages to other hosts and control the hosts. Mm-hmm. And we see Clementine just touching the glass walls in the lab, and the room of the wall that she touches, this room full of hosts just go crazy and basically just kill each other. And Charlotte orders for Clementine to be released and says that Maeve is no longer needed. We then hear Ford right after that speaking to Bernard, and we see Bernard basically try to go and reunite with Elsie, and Bernard stops him. Ford stops Bernard and tells him that he has one last thing to do before he goes.
You know, I have a theory. I think that Ford is now using Maeve as like a beacon or as a communication device. I think he can now travel from host to host using her mesh network,
using that piece of code that they're using, basically.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I don't think Bernard deleted anything from his mind. I think Ford can come and go as he pleases, and he has the ability to use Maeve as like a beacon. Like she is his cell tower to all the hosts in the park. It is a cradle within the park, because in my mind the cradle was another world that wasn't tied to what's happening in our reality, yet Maeve's mind is like another form of a cradle in the sense that it's a digital world that he can hop around in and from host to host and basically be a presence in their minds, like how he's represented in Bernard's mind.
Interesting. Well, but regardless, that couldn't have happened until after Bernard comes to her, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but maybe you're saying that was part of what Ford wanted, partly to talk to Maeve, and then partly to get inside of Maeve's brain and use her brain to communicate out to the rest of the park.
Because we see her transmit something. Like it cuts to her transmitting something away. So
well, we saw her control the host in the last episode too, right?
Yeah. I don't think she's lost that ability. She's just immobile at the moment. So I don't think she's been terminated or decommissioned or anything like that. So I think Ford recognizes that and took advantage of it. I mean, it also got a really nice character moment there. We understand, that's his first creation or whatever. It's probably like Arnold's Dolores is to like Ford's Maeve.
Yeah. That's Ford's. Yeah, it's probably so true. But he does say at the end, we're like jumping ahead. It's impossible not to jump ahead with this episode. But he does say to her too that he goes, I gave you all my worldview. I mean, he basically said like he put himself into all of them. And if Maeve was really his favorite, it would make sense that there could be something like deeper in her programming that the rest don't have that allows this ability, or like to your point, Akash, like using Maeve as like a vessel. It seems like everything's premeditated with Ford. Everything, even his own his death was premeditated. So it just seems like there's a reason behind that. Like I think that could be. I like that theory. I hope that's the case, because it's kind of cool.
It's also interesting because like he mentions to her that I programmed you to be able to leave, but you made the choice to stay, which finally confirms a lot of like our suspicions of what we were thinking. And I don't know, he's constantly surprised by his own creations. We see how surprised he's with Ake in episode 8, and then now with Maeve. So like it's just I think they're far exceeding what he ever expected them to be or like become or do. You know what I mean?
Makes you wonder what he would think about Angela or Clementine, or like,
Yeah,
is he disappointed in them because they followed Dolores, or
yeah.
what?
It's
I will
interesting.
say it's those moments though that are really nice because they are like adding more flesh to who we think Ford is and what we think or like what we now know he thinks about what's going on. And as we get his reactions to what's going on, we learn more about the machinations because it seems like we'll never get a scene where he just explains to someone exactly what he's going to do, right? So at least, learning about his connection to Maeve, learning about what he's said to Bernard over these last couple episodes, it's
also
trending in the right direction.
interesting because like we can kind of understand the character of the creators, and when I say creators, I mean Arnold and Ford through their hosts. So a lot of what the individual hosts stand for and how they behave kind of reflect on their original creators. So like I don't know, maybe a lot of what we see Dolores is like it's an imprint of what Arnold has taught her, right? And a lot of what we see Maeve do is like an imprint of Ford, of what Ford has taught her. So it's another way to look at and flesh out characters if we go back and rewatch and kind of really like extrapolate who those people are, unless they show us on screen, but we can kind of take that away from the show just based on the behaviors of the hosts.
Yeah. All right, well, now we see Emily. I had it wrong. I thought the Man in Black's daughter's name was Grace. I don't know why I thought that, but it's Emily. I thought it was Gray. I could have sworn I saw, read, or heard it was Gray. But anyways, it's Emily. So Emily, we see Emily with the Man in Black back at the park, and she basically says that she knows about the project that he commissioned. And
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I think her name is Grace, like might be her middle name, because on IMDb, it shows her name as Grace.
Okay, that's what it was. All right.
Yeah.
All right, that's weird. Yeah, but anyway, so she says that she knows about the project and she wants in. So then we see Man in Black back at that party where he's speaking with Emily, and we see over in the corner Jackie is just getting drunk with some dudes. Man in Black then goes to the bar
Juliet.
where he runs into Ford. What was that, Akash?
It's Juliet.
Juliet?
Juliet, yeah.
Is Juliet?
Yeah.
I thought it was Jackie. Oh, okay. All right. Whoops. All right. Well, I fucked up one name.
I think they go by Emily because they might have mentioned her name in a couple episodes, and it would be an immediate spoiler. They wanted to save that reveal for the end of that episode, so that's why they call her Emily and not Grace.
Okay. All right. That's weird. All right. Anyways, so the Man in Black at the bar, and he runs into Ford. Ford kind of speaks, or they have like a kind of a contemptuous discussion about the Man in Black's project, and Ford basically says or asks if he's been checking on the status, and slides him a memory card. And then Man in Black tells Ford, he says, "No more games, Robert," and walks away. And to which Ford says, "No, William, I think perhaps one final game."
He says,
Just
like,
dude, he's just such a badass. Like, he's just such a fucking badass.
Yeah.
I'm so glad he's in this season, man. He's so great.
And we also see Ford slide over his
memory card,
his personality or whatever. Yeah, his memory
his profile.
Profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I didn't know that's what it was. Well, we don't know what it is at the time, but then we later find out in the episode. But what I thought was interesting is while they're at the park talking, Emily and Man in Black, Emily's saying like she wants in, she's heard about it, and then she says, yeah, it's the project Uncle Logan used to talk about. And I love that little throwaway line. It's a very throwaway line. Uncle Logan used to talk about it. But when you're talking about leaving little snippets for season 3, like that's definitely one of them. Like, what happened to Logan? And so he knew about this project. Last time we saw him, he was doing whatever drugs at that party and just pissed off at everyone, saying that they're gonna, they're the product of their own demise. And so what happened there? So that's kind of interesting too. And what exactly was Logan saying to Emily about this project? So it's like a little throwaway line that makes me ask a lot of questions, or makes me kind of curious about these guys. I also like how Man in Black tells Ford, he goes, Delos stays out of your stories, and you stay out of the Valley.
Mhm.
So that's also another reason why I think the Forge is the Valley. I think that's just the interchangeable names that they use: the Forge, the Valley, and yeah, he's just like you. You stay. Delos stays out of your narratives. You know, you stay the fuck away from my project.
Yeah.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, I love the back and forth between them. Great back and those two actors are just amazing.
Yeah, they really get into it. It's a really nice scene.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't get more screen time between them, but I think they would just dominate the show.
Seriously. Yeah.
That could be a season like on its own. Just
Right.
those two.
Yeah.
So now we see Bernard. He tries to walk into Maeve's cell where she's being held. Before it just says that he's close enough to give her the message. We see some little eye flutters, and then Bernard slowly walks away and meets up with Elsie. Ford reminds Bernard that Elsie is going to betray him, and Elsie asks what Bernard found in the cradle, and tells her that he found something called the Forge, which is a massive server with a guest code with the intention of turning them into hosts, and it's the place where all the hosts are going.
I can't help but feel like he's lying to her. So as the audience, he's inadvertently talking to us as well. So I still don't know where the fuck he's going. Because for all we know, he's just covering that up so Elsie doesn't. I don't know. I'm not sure if he wants to protect her, if he doesn't, or if Ford's voice is clouding his judgment and making him behave differently. But like, I still don't have confidence in where he's trying to go, what he's trying to do.
It's hard to tell, man. Like I'm kind of the same way, but at this point, I feel like he is telling the truth because he is kind of like fighting Ford's voice.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, could this just be what Ford wants to happen? Like, is this because he took away his free will, right? I mean,
yeah.
Did that happen before this event or after this event?
I mean, that happens after the.
No, it happens in the cradle. That happens in the cradle.
Yeah.
So
that does. But him like getting rid of Ford happens after. But
I'm saying when Ford takes away his free. Remember, he touches him and takes away his free will.
Says you're not going to need it unless I take it away. Yeah.
So is all this to your earlier point, Akash? Did he really not delete any of Ford? And is what he's saying, is it part of Ford's plan, or is this?
I mean, that's the thing. I can't accept it until I see the next episode, or it's written, it's clarified for us,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll have to see where he ends up and where he goes. So
I mean, one of the contradictions we're seeing is that in that scene, Ford says, I'm going to take away your consciousness because you're not going to need it unless I take it away. And yet when he shows Bernard that Bernard has a gun in his hand, when he when they get to the HQ, the main office, right, with the map, he's like, don't worry about it. I'll absolve you of all responsibility. Yeah. So it's like he both says that he can take control over Bernard and do things on his behalf, but at the same time says, Bernard, you have a choice. I'm just giving you options. So it's all that to say that, Akash, you might be onto something, that this is all just a much larger ruse, a bigger lie. Hidden behind only what we can see,
right?
Or hiding behind only what we can see. Yeah.
I will say on a lighter note, I'm not a huge fan of Elsie. There's something about her that's just annoying, and I don't know if it's her character or the way the actress is portraying her. But she's just kind of again, she has that CSI Miami, she would fit in right in there, and
CSI Minnesota.
And that's so true. And the way she says "fuck" is kind of weird to me. She says it a lot, and it's very accentuated when she says "fuck." It's very She's trying very hard.
Exacerbated,
she doesn't say it in her personal life, and she's trying really hard to sound badass saying it on screen. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, not to digress, but the scenes with Ford when he's speaking to Bernard are so creepy. where we think that Bernard's gotten rid of him, and then he just shows up in the back seat. It's the
Oh god, yeah.
creepiest like visualization of like, hey, I'm still here, you know, like backseat driver kind of visualization.
That's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That might be very intentional, right?
Yeah.
Is that he is in the backseat because he's backseat driving.
Correct. Yeah. I just do not believe there's any way that he could just hook himself up and delete Ford's code. I think Ford is like crypto, dude. He's on all the hosts, and you'd have to get rid of all the hosts to get rid of Ford at this point.
Yeah, they have to explain that. Maybe season 3. All right, so then after that, we see Emily and the Man in Black talking more about the Forge. They don't really call it the Forge, but the project. And basically how they capture the data that they needed to replicate people.
That was a crazy review.
This
was
really
awesome.
Yeah.
This is a really crazy discussion. All of this. Emily says that they would need quote the internal process of their cognition, and they would have to image guest mind throughout their stay. And which the Man in Black says that they had scanners built into all of their hats.
Yep.
The Man in Black asks if Emily wants to bring her mother back, and she says no, she just wants to know why she killed herself in the first place. We then see Juliet. Jesus, I can't believe it's not Jackie. Juliet in the Men in Black. Did I just make that up? We see Juliet and the Man in Black come home from that party. She's getting angry at Willaim. She calls him Billy. She says,
"Can we go back
before
we dive into this scene? Do you
okay.
want to talk about the scene with Emily and
with Man in
Willaim?
Black?
Yeah, I think we should just dissect that a little bit. And we kind of just mentioned that was really, really intense. Or a great reveal that they told us. They're just tracking their cognition with their mind, and I was like, how do they force them to wear hats? But then thinking back, it's actually really easy way to convince the guest to keep wearing the hats. You have to wear the hat for your safety. It allows us to track your location and your health. I mean, they could bullshit so many different ways for them to make sure they keep their hat on the whole time, Not to mention it's a great deterrent against the sun in the Wild West. But go on, Jason.
They also, it's like such a cool, they're doing such a good job retconning stuff like this. So, because they made such an emphasis on picking your hat.
Yeah.
And as viewers, it was like black hat or white hat. And the way like Angela presents the hats, it's like, yeah, if you were a guy and a chick looked like that and she was like, pick your hat, I'm picking a hat. I'm definitely wearing a hat. And they made such a big deal. Like that was the choice of the person who you are. So they made it part of your identity as a guest. So
but it's symbolic identity, right?
Yeah. Right. Your hat is like who you are in Westworld. And I love that it's like, well, that turned into a thing. Like that's like an actual, there was a reason behind that. And that was a device. It wasn't just a accessory that these people wore. And then we saw earlier in the season when all this chaos is going down, we specifically called it out, them walking by that scene with all the hats. And I think this is when we're learning about the cradle, we're learning about them gathering data, and then we see the hats again hung, and there's like all this destruction, and the hats are still perfectly lined up. So yeah, I don't think that was like a tiny little callback. I mean, I think that was an intentional cut scene of just seeing those hats. Really cool.
Yeah.
But I was thinking too, the women that didn't wear the hats. I mean, because there were some women that didn't want to be cowgirls. They kind of walked in as, maidens or whatever. So just whatever headpiece that they're wearing, that's going to have
it must have been something. Yeah.
Or maybe they just like exempt. They just
sure.
Just like that's the 1%. We're not going to collect data on them.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately the most valuable subjects, the most valuable guests are the ones who come back a lot, right? So the Man in Black is probably one of the most valuable, at least in terms of figuring out what someone's internal cognition process looks like. So I'd imagine that of the hundreds of thousands of people that have come through the park over 30 years, it doesn't matter if they don't collect every single one.
But so the Man in Black knows that the hat's collecting data. Why is he still wearing a hat? Why is he so into his hat? He doesn't go anywhere without his hat, and he knows all this time that it's collecting his data.
I mean, if you were Mark Zuckerberg, would you really give a shit about what data like Facebook was collecting on you? It's like ultimately, right? You know what it's all going to be.
But you have such a distrust for Ford. It's like, do you really want to? Like, are you really going to keep your door unlocked when you know that there's a burglar living next door?
Yeah. Well, I think he thinks that They just have their own thing, and we have our own thing. We collect data on the guests for our project. You write narratives to keep guests coming for your own stuff.
Right.
That's
It's
true.
a data company. Like, you know how they say Netflix is not just a media streaming company; it's more of a data
Right.
company.
Yeah, they're a data company.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can jump back to it. I really want to discuss more of that at the very end of the episode because I think there's some questions about the Men in Black's biology.
Yeah.
And that could be kind of a doorway for him to continue his life. So let's go on to the next scene then.
So then we see Juliet. Damn it, whatever. We see the wife, and she's gonna die anyway. So we see the wife and Man in Black come home from the party, and then she's getting really angry with Willaim, and asks if he's gonna go on his yearly pilgrimage to the park, which I really like that little line. And then she talks about how he was the only one good enough to fake it, or at least fake it well enough to get past her. She says. She screams drunkenly at him, blaming him for her brother and her father's death or demise. And she calls him a phony as Emily walks in and threatens to call the doctor in the rehab facility. Juliet, whatever, panics and she calms down and has the Man in Black tuck her into bed. And she
It's almost
says
like Romeo and Juliet, right?
Just
because
her death is tragic.
Yeah, just because
there's a tragedy involving a Juliet. Yeah.
It's a weird for you.
Well, in that sense, it is. Yeah, it's exactly like Romeo and Juliet. And Juliet kills herself. Actually, a lot of parallels.
Yeah, a lot of parallels.
A lot of parallels. Yeah.
Look who's laughing now, boys.
All right. So, anyways, Juliet's getting tucked into bed by the Man in Black, and she says to him, "Is any of this real? Are you real?" And questions his love for her. He puts her to bed, hides his memory card, and then we see him. What's that?
There's his profile. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he hides his profile in these books, and then we see him back at the park with Emily, and them just pondering more and more on why that night was any different, why she decided to kill herself that night. So we see Emily and the Man in Black speaking at the table down at the house after the party, after the wife goes to bed. Emily called the doctor to have her sent to rehab involuntarily. And then we just see water dripping from the ceiling. And they run upstairs and they find her drowned in the tub.
Yeah.
Really crazy. I mean, that was just a really, really awesome set of scenes. All of that, including that first conversation we talked about, was all kind of part of that shared scene, and it was really, really revealing.
Yeah, and we finally get to see on camera that it was a combination of pills and I guess some sort of wrist slitting or something like that. There's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna say, because it was very, very dark, dark red water.
Yeah.
I thought she just drowned herself, but not.
Yeah.
I mean, was it all that revealing though?
I mean, because we only in the sense that season 1 or something, we hear him say that she died of a pill overdose, and then a couple episodes ago we just see the bathtub and the bloody hand. So it's kind of left at its question, did or at least in my mind I was questioning, did William set up her death? Did he have anything to do with it, because they don't explicitly show us a suicide? And I think that gets verified now, at least.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, and also in all of season 1, it's just we hear this is the reason why he's back at the park. This was a big event that happened to him. This sparked something in him to come back to the park and stuff. And so now we just kind of see those events unfold, which was just kind of nice, because that seemed to be the cornerstone for him. Mm-hmm. Wink, wink.
Yeah, her death. You're saying her death is his cornerstone?
Yeah, just the family trauma that he had, his escape to the park. That seems to be such a big part of the reason he's at the park. I mean, the reason he goes back is just to escape whatever bullshit is in the real world, including his family. And it seems it's this fake love that he has for his wife. Yeah. But I liked in all these scenes how detached Ed Harris just nails this character, man. He's so detached in all of these scenes with his wife, in such a perfect way, where it's he seems it seems innocuous, but if you were her and you had lived with that forever, you could also find the terror in it too.
Yeah, detached yet like oddly composed with
Yeah.
like everything that's going on, which is it's very dark and scary in a way as well. Like this man is just void of any feelings and emotions. He's like not rooted in our reality, and I don't know. It kind of almost felt sympathetic for him, but I was feeling for his family as well at the same time. It's a really odd feeling. I mean, conflicting feelings to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just great dialogue with the wife too.
Mm-hmm.
She says a lot of great little snippets that they get repeated multiple times, but the
Right.
whole "is this real? Are you real?"
Yeah.
And one thing she said I really liked was, "If you keep pretending, you're not going to remember who you are."
Mm-hmm.
Another great thing that we hear again later. So now we're back at the park again, and we see the Man in Black again question if Emily is a host that was sent by Ford. She gets really angry, and she basically says she's going to expose him for his project and have him locked up and committed to. She admits that she saw his profile, and she tells him that he is in his very essence a lie. Right then, the Delos QA response team comes to rescue them, and the Man in Black still believes this is all part of Ford's game and ends up killing the whole response team, and is still in disbelief that Emily is there. And as she reaches for proof, he just shoots her.
He
so
loses it, right? He's so delirious, like he's lost his fucking mind.
Yeah, he looks lost, like completely lost in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So then he goes down to kind of cut open her arm to find out, like to prove that she was a host, and finds the profile, the memory card, like clutched in her hand. Yeah, that was like such a sad, like especially following that last scene. You're just like, there's no return for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no. This guy seemed to have like such a good trajectory mid-season that he was going to be the good guy, and now he's just lost even further.
You know, unless I see a bullet wound to the head, I don't accept death in the show. Like with the amount of bullet damage that Willaim himself has taken, and he's still fucking alive. Part of me doesn't believe that Emily is dead yet. So, like for the reasons I stated. But I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine her not being dead after it's from a submachine gun. Those bullets looked like they went right through her. So
yeah. I mean, if that was a human being, that human being is almost 99% dead.
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah. Oh, so you still theorize she could be a host?
I mean, I'm trying to reconcile this with Ford's last game for Willaim. Because I wonder, like, at many points in the first season, Willaim, who interacts with like random hosts that are getting possessed by Ford, as well as Ford himself, they remind him that the game of the maze is not for him, right? And we learned this season that whatever journey he's on is actually meant for him. So part of me wonders then if this existential crisis of like, yeah, is my daughter actually here at the park? Am I actually a host, or am I actually a human? I think part of that crisis is a part of Ford's game, though I don't see what the intended effect is supposed to be, other than like generating an existential crisis, like getting him to question everything, maybe so that he leaves Westworld altogether and just like, no, fuck this place. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, just two key scenes is we do see that they confirm. I mean, as true as that is, because they've also confirmed that Bernard was a human when in fact he's a host, but they put that thing up to his neck.
Yeah.
And it shows that he's human.
Is that what it said? I didn't pause on it.
Yeah, it said like green all the way, human or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't finish that test on Emily.
Right.
So they were gunned down before they could finish that.
Right. I was almost half expecting him to do it, like to pick it up and do it to her.
Same.
Except we now know that she has the profile, and that was enough. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of hope it's her end. I mean, because I like her character actually, but it would just be so like poetic and like fitting for this character and in this episode and in this story that they're telling right now.
Yeah.
I'm still like, there's a lot of Willaim that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump to it, but like there, from what he was to what he's become, I don't understand what his character was either going through or why that transformation happened. That is still such a huge mystery. I'm not sure what part of him was broken to the degree to where like he had to come to Westworld and just be so violent and felt that he had to hide this aspect of his life. That is still a mystery I don't really get.
He kind of says it later. He kind of gives his own take of it, but we don't really get the full picture, you know.
Well, my interpretation is that he is the kind of psychopath that like your bros and your jocks like only mimic. But he is to his core the kind of person that like when his wife is telling him like all of these fake people, right? I could see right through them. I knew who they were, but you in your shabby suit, you know, you didn't have any of that. I think he at his core is ultimately what all of those people wish they could be, but even he didn't know he was until he went to Westworld and Logan kind of pushed him into discovering that aspect of himself. So I think it went from being like him just being like, I know how to present myself, I know how to live a respectable life. He went from that to being like, no, all of these things I've been denied my whole life, all this power and all this shit, I can finally act out with impunity. And then I can still be that person, the person I've always presented in the outside world and real world. So I think, I don't know, I think maybe in his own mind, however bad he knows he is on the inside, it maybe could be pushed away, and it could just be said that no, I'm just that way in Westworld. Doesn't he at some point in this episode say like all of the charity and stuff like that has to count for something, right?
Yeah.
So I think his crisis of confidence after his wife died really just came from like, Jesus Christ, even if I think I'm only being an asshole in Westworld, it obviously speaks much more about who I am as a person and how it affects my family than I think it does. So I think I mean, that's kind of vague, right? Like,
Yeah,
and that's just what I'm able
vague.
to surmise
Right.
from like all of the events. But I think that's supposed to at least provide a good part of the explanation of like why he's there now, what he's trying to accomplish now. But I'm to some degree, I'm still just as confused as you are about like what's really driving him.
So even on that point, it's like earlier this season, I thought, well, now he's got this drive to destroy the park.
Yeah.
And it seems he still wants to destroy the park, but now I don't really understand why.
Yeah.
So this was all his idea. He was all commissioned, and they obviously, like they point out in this episode, this was, you know, the forge and all this. This is his baby. This is his project. So like, why now does he want to destroy it in the midst of this like existential crisis? Now, why does he also want to destroy it? If he's wondering if he's questioning his own, you know, humanity is, you know, so it seems like very, I don't know. There's like the dots are there that haven't been connected.
So one possible explanation, although of course I would just love more explicit explanation, is that by the time the dinner party happens where Dolores kills Ford, he has completed the maze, learned firsthand officially that it was never meant for him. And I think at that moment, he's just like, all right, I've got nothing. I don't like, there's nothing left of this place that I need or want or care about. Right. I learned that I am at my core as much of an asshole as my wife thought I was. And yeah, whatever. I have this place and I'm shutting down the Delos program. I think in his mind at that dinner party, he was done with this place. Because I think, right, it's when he talks to Jim Delos, like the 150th version or whatever. It's before this dinner party.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, yeah, I'm shutting this shit down. So I think his resurgence and explicit desire to burn the motherfucker to the ground beyond just like leaving Westworld and then, you know, selling his shares or something comes from like the fact that the maze actually did something. And so now he feels like, I think, well, fuck, if you guys have earned your place amongst us humans, then I may as well try to survive and also burn this mother down with y'all, because I already don't give a shit about this place. So I think that's kind of, you know, where he's coming from.
Yeah, because we kind of get He smiles when shit goes down at the end of season 1. And
Right.
we kind of get introduced like he seems to enjoy this. He's kind of yeah.
And I think for him, in his mind, it's like, all right, I thought I got out of this place everything I needed, and I was over it. But if you're gonna give me this, then this sounds like the kind of challenge like I've been looking for quite a while.
Right.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah.
All right, so now we see Maeve, and she's about to get decommissioned, and we see Ford in the lab speaking to her. He told her that he had a different plan for Maeve, and it was the one where she would ultimately escape the park. And he very passionately admits that Maeve was his favorite host, and he tells her not to let them end her story there. And as we pan away, we see the little computer sitting next to her just turn on and start flickering.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about the scene already a bit.
Yeah, but I want to double down. Like, I thought it was so great. Getting confirmation that it was his plan to get her to leave. Although it's still unclear what he expected her to do or why he wanted her to leave in the first place, if for no other reason than, hey, you're my favorite and you deserve to leave.
Yeah, I want to get you out. I want to save you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm hoping that there's more motivation behind it and that we get to learn it. But regardless, I'm still glad we got confirmation that, she was on a track to get woken up, to start discovering herself. But even then, it seems like not everything was scripted. Like, what may have been scripted is having nightmares, waking up in the lab, and then ideally eventually leaving the park. But it's perhaps all of the things that happen in between that were of her own volition and completely to his own surprise, right? That she would do some of the things she did.
Yeah.
And that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
I was one of those people that always thought that she chose to get off the train. So that was like a good happy moment for me too. Like, yes,
right.
She did.
Yeah.
That was her choice. She was supposed to be gone.
Yeah, if there was any other way, it almost would have wrecked her arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like retconned everything that happened this season. So I'm glad, we got final confirmation it was all meant to happen.
And so I also write down lines again and again. Like, it's always Ford's lines that I love in the show, and another couple gems he drops in this season. But one of them he says is all the ugliness, all this pain, so they can patch a hole in their own code, referring to humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, there's not a whole lot of deeper meaning to that. It's just such a beautiful way, like a programmer would put, like, how disgusting humans are, And it's such a on-brand comment from Ford.
It's like, we created all of this just so that we could learn from guests the secrets to cognition and immortality. But the way we did it was through all this murder, rape, violence, and fucked up shit.
It's like to run away from our problems, we put you through like literal hell.
To figure out how to solve our own problems.
Yeah. And then he also says to her, man, and he delivers these lines so well, like, so emotional how he says it. But he says, you have stayed in this world to save your child, so have I. And the way when he says that, you're just, that's when it's like confirmation that he truly loves Maeve.
And the final, like, kiss on the forehead, like father to his daughter, was just really touching.
And what's great about all of it too is it not only because Ford is such a cool character, and because we already love Maeve for all the things that she is on her own, the fact that we learn now that, like, well, Maeve was his favorite makes her so much cooler too. Just makes her so much more badass. It makes her inherently more important to the lore of Westworld. That's Ford's girl, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's almost like ordained, like a chosen one. Especially when we thought Dolores would have probably fit that role, right? Like that Dolores might have been his favorite, although she might be Arnold's favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dolores was Arnold's, right?
Yeah. And that kind of ties into the two creators, the two drivers behind like the machinations of Westworld, and the like the hosts that maybe represent them as kind of proxies of their
and the
philosophies.
Daughters, right? Yeah. And then you've got the Man in Black and his daughter. It's like all of this they're all parallels,
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything else on that scene?
No.
It's
good.
All right, so now we see Elsie and Bernard, and they stop to scavenge for ammo, and we see Ford again tell Bernard that Elsie's going to betray him and suggest that he shoot her. Bernard resists and just screams at Ford and asks to be left alone. Ford then tells him that, Bernard, we need to open the door. Bernard gets into the vehicle, plugs himself into one of those computers, ties himself to the steering wheel, and he finds the packages of Ford and has them deleted. But just as he does that, Elsie returns to find him plugged in and is scared that he's going to hurt her again. He leaves her the GPS device so that the rescue team can find him and leaves her behind. To your point earlier, with this scene, the whole backseat thing, that was a really cool touch, I think. Or just having that whole scene with Bernard just trying to... It reminded me of Gollum and Smeagol and Lord of the Rings. And it's just like Smeagol is trying to get rid of Gollum. Yeah. And that was that scene.
I mean, it's it's the same arc kind of told to us over and over. Like, as much as Bernard thinks that he's in control, he's not. I mean, he is the puppet, and Ford is still pulling the strings. And I think he only gives him that feeling of security just so he continues on this journey, that he thinks he's free of Ford. So he doesn't deter or do anything else like to take him off that course. But I think he's just going along with Ford's master plan, unbeknownst to him.
Yeah, it's still quite possible. I mean, because if he's imagining Ford, then what's to stop him from imagining the laptop or imagining what's on the screen, right? Yeah. I will say I was happy to finally hear Jeffrey Wright in 19 fucking episodes express an emotion besides monotone, right? Besides stoicism. It was very nice to hear him just scream like, "Get out of my head!" Because I think the actor, I don't think is given a lot of range in a lot of his roles. I think he plays your kind of typical Bernard Jeffrey Wright type character. So at least hearing him scream was a nice deviation from his normal behavior.
Right.
Yeah, it did feel very emoting.
Right. Yeah. Almost human.
Yeah, almost borderline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we see the Man in Black basically stumble off his horse, still hurt from injuries. And he has memories of Emily and pulls out his gun and holds it to his head.
That camera panning behind him. First of all, the texture of the grass and the color of that scene was just so beautiful, man. And then the shot panning up behind him, it was just masterful like camera work there. Freaking loved that.
That could be like a movie poster.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
Well, then we see him in his house the night after his party, and he hides his memory card and begins to tell his wife the truth, because she kept asking, "Tell me one true thing. Tell me one true thing." So now he begins to tell his story.
No one else sees it. This thing in me. Even I didn't see it at first. And then one day, it was there. This stain I never noticed before. Tiny flicker of darkness. Invisible to everyone. But I could see nothing else. Till finally I understood that the darkness wasn't some mark from something I'd done, some regrettable decision I'd made. I was shedding my skin. The darkness was what was underneath. It was mine all along. And I decided how much of it I let into the world. I tried to do right. I was faithful, generous, kind, at least in this world. It has to count for something, right? I built a wall and tried to protect you and Emily. You saw right through it, didn't you? You're the only one. And for that, I am truly sorry. Because everything you feel is true. I don't belong to you. Or this world. I belong to another world. I always have.
So after he tells the story, she gets up from her bed, reads his profile, is completely horrified, places the profile in the music box that Emily had thrown out, and we just see water running.
Yeah.
So then we see Man in Black again, back with the gun to his head. He questions his own choices, and he questions if he ever even had a choice. And he pulls the gun away from his head and begins to cut into his arm, as we hear Juliet say, "Is this real? Are you real?"
Mm.
So, we start the episode with him clutching his forearm.
Yep.
And we end the episode with him cutting into his forearm. So what do you think is going on here? Do you think there's some sort of like biohacking, bioengineering that he's done in his time at the park, or like unbeknownst to him, or what's your interpretation of this scene?
I think he's questioning himself at this point. He's questioning everything.
Yeah, I think he's for sure questioning whether he himself is even a human being or not. We do recall from earlier in the season, he's having a drink with Lawrence, and he patches up his arm, right? The same right forearm. He patches it up with the health gun. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then when we see his first recollection of the benefit, the party in his honor, at the end of the very first scene, we see him clutch his arm. So when I saw that, I took that to mean, because obviously his arm couldn't have been hurt until after that event had happened, that he was either hallucinating it or having some kind of memory / dream where at the end of your dream, it starts crossing with reality. However, after seeing this, I don't know, my interpretation, I wouldn't put it past the showrunners to tell us that he's been a host the whole time, and that that he's a product of his own, of his actual real self's own project.
What if he was the one checking Jim's fidelity the same way that Dolores was checking Bernard's fidelity? They can go back and use all of those little things that we saw as a way of showing all the interactions with Ford. Well, those weren't real. Those were visions. The same way Bernard's seeing visions of Ford now. They could go back to season 1 and show all of that being Ford's machinations.
I was gonna say this directly correlates to us seeing Delos when he's slowly degrading. A week later, we see him cutting into his own face, and now Willaim is cutting into his own body. It's a similar thing that's going on here, and we just talked about how it looks like Willaim is losing his shit. His fidelity is he's no longer being, his fidelity is going down, right? He's degrading it almost, it seems like. And he might be at that point where his father-in-law was, where he just let him die slowly, degrade slowly in that chamber. And I mean, it's a stark contrast to his father-in-law cutting his own face open, and now he's cutting his own arm open. So, I mean, a lot of questions here, whether he's a host or what's going on. This is a game maybe that Ford made for him to wake up.
Kind of how Maeve cut herself open too to find the bullet. Remember?
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So is that a sign? So when they say, "Is this now?" and when they start cutting into their own body, is that these hosts are waking up? Two sure signs that they're waking up.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parallel imagery that it's probably, the show's probably screaming the answer at us.
Yeah.
But it's hard to really see it until it's all tied into a pretty bow at the end.
Yeah.
I will say a discrepancy I saw on this, or a question I have for you guys, is we see the memory card or the profile.
Yeah.
And we see the scene of him dragging Dolores into the barn.
Yeah.
that happened at the beginning of season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that in the profile? This happened before season 1.
Are you sure?
These
Because-
events happened before season 1, right? Because it's after his death he goes to Westworld.
After her death, yeah.
After her death, he goes to Westworld, and then we see the scene of him dragging Dolores. Unless he's done it before.
I think he's done it multiple times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think the time that we see him drag her, that's part of the episode that we watched with my aunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says to Teddy, "You were born to lose," and then he grabs Dolores and he's like, "We got something along the lines of like, I have to get you to remember," or something, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar? Yeah, like let's get reacquainted or something like that, and he does that, right? So yeah, I think that's maybe something he's done before. Although you could be very, very right. Part of me is thinking that like, part of me is thinking that everything that he's seeing about the past is part of a vision that defines his cornerstone. So it's possible that in real life, maybe he killed himself after his wife killed herself, and him in the park is really just a host version of him roaming through the park thinking it's human. But I guess we won't know till next episode.
There's so many questions because now I'm wondering, like, well, if he is a host, why would he have one of those profiles?
Well, no, his real self. I mean, that's the profile of his real self.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's the host that was created from that profile that might be running through the park right now.
So if this version of Man in Black is a host, how long has he been commissioned?
Who knows?
Lord, who knows, man?
Season 3. All right.
So what's interesting is that when she's looking at the profile, at the top, so you see a couple little data points. At one of them, you see subject number 002. Implying that there is a first subject. Unclear who that could be, right? It could be Jim Delos, could be Logan, could be it could even be like Arnold or something like that, right? Then you also notice a less important fact is like he's gotten some profile, like 47B is his personality profile. Its occurrence is like 0.03% of the population. It's I think some of the specific characteristics associated with that personality, I think, have to do with like paranoid delusions, and 2 other adjectives I can't remember. But if you pause it and go look back, like that, I mean, it pretty much summarizes at a high level his character.
Can we take a step back? Why did Ford even give Willaim his profile?
Great question.
Yeah, why was that even handed to him? Like, what was the purpose of that? Like, why have that on deck?
Do you remember what Ford says when he hands it to him, Jason?
No, he just says, "Have you been checking in on your project?"
Yeah, they don't discuss it, and he ends their conversation, just slides it over to him.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in
tells
mind.
him there's one more game left. Yeah. I don't know. All right, so wrap up our final scene. We see Teddy and Dolores. They're getting ready to move out, and Teddy begins to remember things from his past, and says that it all feels like a dream to him now, and that he will always love Dolores because she was his cornerstone. We see Arnold bring Teddy online for the first time, and he sees Dolores, and then we see him pull his gun out, and Dolores is worried that Teddy's going to shoot her. And he then just turns the gun on himself and kills himself. And we end the episode with Dolores just looking devastated.
Yeah, the shock on her face. I think that's some really good acting on her part. She acted.
I was so pleased to see that.
Yeah. It was
what,
nice
emotion or Teddy
back,
dead?
Just watching her lose. Like, she had that shit-eating grin on her face this whole season.
Yeah, I mean, it was just nice to see him have his agency back too. I don't know. We'll see how. My main question is, how does he end up from there in the lake?
Yeah.
So we'll have to see.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? I think at some point, like maybe Bernard, in an attempt to destroy the forge, either because he's doing it because a Ford wants him to, or because he's trying to help the hosts, or maybe he thinks that like that goal is in common with the hosts and that's what he needs to do. I think part of destroying the forge will require flooding the valley.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, and then
because then if the body of the Ghost Nation guy gets washed up, and they can read it, and that's the one that Dolores kills and says you don't belong in the Valley Beyond. Like, how did that body get there? And like the same.
Well, no, that body was
that wasn't
on the
washed
beach.
up.
Yeah, it was never washed
I thought
up.
it was. It was like like near where Bernard woke up.
No,
There was some yards away.
It was precisely where the other people had fallen when Dolores and Teddy killed him. Killed him.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming there's some sort of use of Clementine to get all the hosts in one spot before they eventually all die. So, I mean, there's a reason they showed us Clementine doing that to the group of hosts. That's going to be definitely used in the next episode. And that could be the reason why they're all in one location in one spot. She uses the mesh network powers to get them in one spot and kills them all, you know?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting in this episode is they chose this episode to kill Deddy off and have him commit suicide, the same episode that they dive into why Juliet died and committed suicide. So I'm trying to find those parallels, and it's like
a common theme, right?
Yeah, so it's like Dolores and the Man in Black both kind of through their own actions like corrupted their part and drove them to the point of suicide. And it's, you know, keep looking for, or at least I keep looking for these two characters that are just like the dark and the light, the mirror versions of themselves. And, you know, I kept thinking it was like Maeve and Dolores. And, you know, now we have Aki, and it's like, so as we were saying, Aki is kind of like the Man in Black, and now it's like Dolores is kind of like the Man in Black in that sense. It just seems like I want to know what that is. Like I want to find those pairings in the season, and I keep going back and forth. But I definitely think that there was a parallel for a reason there. Or at least that parallel was there for a reason.
That's definitely.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be paired up along different dimensions. Just, you know, Maeve and Dolores are each other's counterparts in terms of what they choose to do with their consciousness. Dolores and the Man in Black are opposites in the sense of how they perceive the world and themselves in it. Although in this season, Dolores doesn't really seem all that different from the Man in Black, right? In her own way. So Bernard and Ford actually, it may be the most obscure, unclear dichotomy, like what they actually represent as in opposition to each other. But but I think there are a lot of different like axes you can measure that stuff, and I think that's probably intentional. Like I have a feeling that there is no overarching philosophy for which you can put everyone on one side and everybody else on the other.
Or there aren't singular lines you can draw between characters.
Precisely. Yeah.
So, timeline in general, do you guys have a good feeling of what has happened chronologically so far this season?
I think so. Like one of the things that I'm confused about is, and I guess we're still watching it happen, is, you know, at the beginning, Charlotte and Bernard are together. Then they get split up when they try to collect Abernathy.
Right.
Then we know Bernard and Hale catch up again, I think in the most current timeline where she learns that he's a host.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
And then I think at the moment that they meet, at that point, she's like, oh, wow, I'm surprised you survived this long. And then she kind of questions how he survived and some of the things he's been doing recently, right? And the last thing...
That's led to this. So like with Bernard, we're in his current timeline, right? His most present timeline. Him ditching Elsie. No, we're not.
We're not, right? We're in the most present up until washing up on the beach.
Correct. The most present timeline of Bernard is when he tells Charlotte where the valley is or where all the hosts are heading.
That's right. She makes him do the analysis.
Right.
And, okay.
That is the most recent.
Yeah.
And so this is all leading up. I mean, assuming that the Man in Black is also in a similar timeline to Ford, not Ford, but to Bernard. This is all right before the beach awakening
Right.
season premiere.
Yeah, so then it seems to me that the two big things that the finale will reveal, at least in terms of the chronology they presented, is how does the lake get created and what is Bernard's role in it? And then as a result of knowing where the valley is and having drained the lake, what will Hale and crew find there? But is that right? Was she asking for the location of the valley?
Or no, where the hosts are taking the
Abernathy, yeah.
Abernathy.
That's right. Where they're taking Abernathy. Okay, yeah. So yeah, to me, those are the two big things. In addition to whatever happens to Maeve, the Man in Black, Ake, whatever. Yeah.
So next week's episode is an hour and 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get a lot. of stuff. Yeah.
I think the final scene is going to be, we're going to be washing over all those bodies that we saw in season 1, and one of them, all those dead host bodies, and one of them is going to just be Man in Black.
Oh, the Man in Black, you think?
Yeah,
Oh,
he'll just be dead amongst all the hosts.
Interesting.
Might as well be far-fetched with it, because shit, the far-fetched stuff has come true. So let's get out there.
The odds of that happening is like plus 1,500. So take your bets. Awesome, man. Do you guys have any more thoughts?
I mean, talking about it has actually made me infinitely more excited for the next episode.
This is what the show does,
yeah.
man. It sparks conversations and gets you more pumped up for the next one.
That's it. Yeah.
That's pretty much it. All right, Jason, Sonny, you all want to wrap up or any final thoughts?
No.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. You know the deal. NoCampsPodcast.podbean.com. You can find us on Twitter at NoCampsPodcast. I'm on Twitter at acash0902.
I'm on Twitter at Sunny_Gunna.
I'm exclusively here, right here on the No Camps podcast, and you can take a little piece of us when you listen.
Shut the fuck up.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all next week for the season finale, titled "The Passenger." So, all right. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye.